Thank you for watching or listening to Higher Ed Athletics, and welcome inside the Game One Studio, the preferred apparel and equipment provider of Higher Ed Athletics. This conversation was fun. I had Marcus Hilliard, the Tennessee Executive Associate AD, on the podcast. He's a Tennessee alum. We kind of nerd out about higher education doctorate programs. I don't get to do that very often. It is called Higher Ed Athletics. And we just talk everything about great mentors he's had the chance to work for, what he learned from his dad, a legendary football coach, and really the day to day going through the strategic plan at Tennessee. And then talking about things like Leadership Knoxville, which is a professional development program that really almost every locale has, whether at the county level or the regional or a city, outside of the institution that I really think more people need to try to do. Whether you're a deputy AD or you're an athletic director in that area, really embed yourself with the rest of the business community and people in different leadership positions. And I think in this new world, that also turns into how you can approach LinkedIn. So we go into that detail. Also pull in some tactical things about how he is, working in this strategic plan, but also how does he learn best? I like asking, future ADs, how do you consume information as learning? And he's a lifelong learner. And really, what podcasts do you listen to? How do you take notes? Things like that we definitely cover. So just a really fun conversation. I think this one I probably talk more than I usually do when I interview people, but Marcus and I had coffee at the Final Four before we did this interview, and so it was really fun to get to know him. I think that maybe made me feel even more comfortable talking to him, but lots of energy with Marcus. Clearly loves UT Knoxville. But what I think is interesting that I pulled out of this, looking at his background, is he's worked at several different types of institutions. And when you're an aspiring AD, that different budget number really, in my opinion, presents opportunities to itself, because you understand when you see, right now at the time of recording this, there's 24 open D1 athletic director positions. So when you're evaluating fit, institutional fit and alignment and challenges, having someone that's worked at, an Austin P State or a UCF or a Tennessee, these different levels can kind of give you a better perspective on AD openings. And it's important to be great at what you're doing and where you're doing it at. But at the same time, if someone comes on this podcast and they're not already an athletic director, odds are that they're going to be one day based on the invites. And so just really enjoyed this conversation. Watch, listen to Marcus Hilliard. So Marcus, what are one or two specific things, and this can be that's already happened or things you're currently leading right now in your kind of responsibilities at Tennessee that you're proud of or excited about?
Yeah, there are a lot of different things that come to mind, but if I think about it honestly, it's our strategic plan, and that's going to be at the top of the list for me. We got here in 2021. We knew we had an idea of how successful we could be here in a short period of time at Tennessee, but we wanted to create a plan for how we were going to get there. And then obviously working with Danny at UCF before and having gone through that experience of building the Knights Charge there, we ended up getting our group of people together, and I led the efforts to create Rise Glorious. And it's really become our North Star over the past 4 years. And so we're, again, in year 4 right now to 5. And when I think about it, by the year 2, year 3 period, we really hit a mark and just achieved a whole bunch of success in such a short period of time, which is crazy when you think about it, given how the national landscape is and with everything going on. So we've broken a ton of revenue records in back-to-back years. Our annual operating budget has almost doubled. Our student athletes continue to dominate and excel in the classroom. And we've had our best years in school history relative to the Learfield Directors Cup finishes, and also securing multiple years in the SEC All Sports Cup Championship. So again, all these items have been accomplished, and they're able to be successful because we got a department full of talented and great people, but everybody's just continued to work the plan, and we've achieved a lot of success in really a short period of time.
Yeah, and anytime you can get your hands on strategic planning experience, that's got to be one of the most critical things that you can work on, right? That is going to come into play one day when you're an athletic director and setting that vision. So I'm sure, can you believe it's been almost the whole length of that? I think when I saw it, it was like, so it ends through the 2027 or 2029, you said?
Yeah, it goes through 2026, 27. So this is getting ready to be, we're coming up on year 5.
Isn't that wild that we're even
Yeah.
in 2026? We just got to slow down, man.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me. Yeah, so I'm always kind of curious just about that, like the getting to have deputies on, hear exactly what you're doing. I like the day to day and the big vision thing. So I think the Tennessee athletic department is obviously known as a place where I've had Danny on the show, I've had Chancellor Plowman on the show.
Hmm.
That you're going to get a lot of experiences, and you having worked with Danny and then being an alum of Tennessee, I'm just kind of curious about. Tell me about that culture inside your athletic department, where thanks to the way Danny changes up. He's always been creative with job titles, switching responsibilities around. You guys
Hmm.
have obviously had some ads leave this past calendar year or past year for ad jobs, but just talk to me about what it's like working inside that athletic department, trying to get these, this kind of learning environment on the job.
Yeah, it's been awesome. I've been fortunate to work with leaders who place a high value on culture, and our culture here at Tennessee is one of the best I've ever been a part of. Danny believes in hiring people who can not only do the job that they have the experience in, but also, they have the ability for folks to be adaptable and flexible. You'll take a look across the landscape, and some departments will have a bunch of people who may be experts only in their respective fields, right? But we have a team of people here who can do a lot of different jobs. You can plug us in different opportunities in different spaces, and we'll keep the wheels going at a high level. Our staff, we really love being here at Tennessee. Our families become really close. We watch each other's children grow up, and as cliche as it sounds, we don't just view this as just a job. When we say we're the Big Orange family, the emphasis is truly on family. And so as a result of that, you'll see people get opportunities to jump in a chair at a rapid rate, just because we have whole bunch of teams, a team of people that are utility people.
Say it every time. I partner with onrise.care because I care about college athletes. I spent 10 years working in athletic academic support. I know how much importance you have to place on mental health. Think about all the pressures our athletes are facing. Coming out of high school, adjusting to college is enough stress for anybody. Now all of a sudden you throw in the transfer portal. You throw in even more expectations. Just the concern of being an athlete in season, out of season, making friends, making connections, finishing that degree, staying eligible, actually performing in your sport. All of these are everyday concerns for college athletes. I know you care about your college athletes too. Some of you listening, your department may not be able to afford the support. So that's why I partner with OnRise to make sure you're aware that you can have one call, same day setup, immediate athlete access to licensed clinicians, retired pros, and 24/7 crisis care. It's going to be very affordable for you, less than what you would spend on one full time employee in house. No hiring hassles, no initiative fatigue. And let me just say, the passion Kim has for this business is why you have to go to onrise.care. Tell them that Travis from Higher Ed Athletics sent you. Check out their website and see why you can start providing access to mental health for your athletes, because I know how much you care about them. You're also an alumnus, and so I'm always kind of curious. There's a lot of focus on like ads that are ads at their alum institution. I've been starting to look more about who went back home and who's working in the department, as at the place that they went to. I think Chancellor Donde Plowman's probably the best executive in higher education. She's her academic discipline is literally being a change agent. So she talked to me about why she went and got Dr. Danny White, who's
Hmm.
also seen in the industry as kind of a change agent. But just getting to work where that's the leadership you have on campus, not just in your side of your department, but also at the chancellor level. And Randy Boyd's a great system president. So I mean, it's no secret on this podcast. I speak very highly of University of Tennessee, especially Knoxville. I think it's a great institution and university system. But I mean, how proud are you to just go to work every day at this phase in your career, getting to
Hmm.
be at the place that educated you too?
Yeah, I'm excited all the time, and I really, in a lot of days, I feel like I'm waking up to come into a dream. We work a lot in this industry, and we could only hope and dream of having the opportunity to come and work at our alma maters. And so I really get to wake up to my dream each and every day. But you spoke to it. Our leadership team, from top to bottom, we got the best in the business. When you talk about Randy Boyd, who's our system president, and Chancellor Plowman, and even Danny in leading our athletics department, man, that's a powerful 1, 2, 3 punch. We have amazing support. Chancellor Plowman and President Boyd give us the opportunity, and they let us be good stewards of our resources, and also they trust us to be caretakers of our iconic brand. And so as an alum here, experiencing the success, but having a direct and in some ways an indirect hand in that success, it really is. It's a humbling experience, but also it's one that I don't take lightly. I'm truly proud each and every day to wake up and to come in and be part of such an amazing team at a place that I care deeply about.
I want to just know, like, can you tell me more about this Leadership Knoxville program, and what you took out of that experience? Because I looked at a little bit on the website when I saw that on your bio, and I think it was like the motto is every class is the best class or something like that, like, or the best class ever. But my wife went through something here in our county here in Indiana that I think is very similar, but maybe not as high level. Exposure in this environment with the people that are in yours, but just talk about what that is and what you took out of that experience in Knoxville.
Yep. So Leadership Knoxville, it was a year-long leadership development program that paired you with a lot of people and some of the best leaders in the city of Knoxville. I'm naturally a servant leader, and so the program for me was honestly a perfect match. It's hard to list just one or a few different takeaways from that experience because I got so many of them, but it was by far one of the best professional development experiences that I've had that was outside of sport. It allowed me an opportunity to deepen my connection with the Knoxville community, and I got a chance to create some friendships with some amazing community leaders, and also kind of fine tune some of my leadership skills as well. Travis, to be honest with you, regardless of where I go, I've made some lifelong friendships as a result of Leadership Knoxville, and I know that they'll serve to impact me very well throughout my professional and personal career.
Yeah, so I went on this kind of like idea the other day where I saw someone's LinkedIn post, and I was just I write here in my notebook like all the time. Like, I'm more of a write it and then I'll move it over to digital later, and I because that way if I'm going to a my kid's sports practice or something, I always have a pen and paper, but I won't be on my phone necessarily. So they just know, like, dad's doing something with his notebook, but like I look up and it's something about putting pen to paper. But I had this idea about why are more athletic directors, at least aspiring ADs or newer ADs in this model, like, I think more of them need to either participate in things like this, like carve out the time, or some of them participate in a university wide one, like Indiana University had a leadership series. But I'm also thinking about just individualizing your LinkedIn, like maximizing LinkedIn. I just think, like, right now, like, if you're an AD or a deputy AD, if and you're tasked with trying to connect people in the industry, or like not the industry, your community, what better way than like also having a big presence on LinkedIn? Go the extra mile and get LinkedIn Premium, where you can actually see your alumni, what they're doing. You can see the connections of what businesses they're working at. You can start putting out content to just keep them communicated. So I don't know. When I saw you were part of Leadership Knoxville, I was just thinking, it's like, what could a digital version of leadership be? And I really do think, like, people, and this is not to say that if you do or you do not, but like, I think in the future you're going to start seeing more ADs get active on LinkedIn. So I mean, what do you think about that comment?
Yeah, I agree. I think we are always looking for ways to sharpen our tools in different ways and more unique ways. And I think that, LinkedIn and we have to go to alternative services to be able to get some of those skills. I think it only makes us more of a well-rounded leader. We're always going to be top of mind in athletics leadership, and that's going to always be our focus. But I think we can stand to learn a lot from people outside of our current business. I think about my experience here and working with Danny. We always look to what the professional sport teams and other corporate companies and organizations are doing to try to bring back some of those best practices into what we do here at Tennessee, because we're not just satisfied with just being an athletics department and not thinking outside of the box and not pushing the envelope. But in order to get those type of experiences and learning those new opportunities and growing that skill set, you got to think outside of the box and go pursue leadership experiences in non-traditional pathways.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And you have also been able to work for some incredible athletic directors that many people will probably know every name that I'm about to throw at you. And then a really legendary football coach, and I'll get to at the end. But I'm going to go through these one at a time. And it doesn't have to be rapid fire, but like maybe one or two things that you learn and you will take from each of these leaders that you've worked with. And let's start with Gerald Harrison, who's you worked with him Austin P State, but now obviously he's since moved on to Marshall. But you spent some time together there. So what can you say about Gerald?
Yeah, what I learned from Gerald and working with him is the power and the importance of intentionality. Gerald is an incredibly intentional leader. I had a chance to work with him both at Duke and at Austin P, and at both places we had to be intentional in everything that we did, given that we weren't always in the highest part from a resource level standpoint, right? But Gerald honestly allowed me the opportunity he embraced my creativity and dared to be different and kind of come up with crazy and unique ideas to help grow our brand.
Yeah, the Gov's always a cool name too. And so I visited that campus when I was going through on a family vacation. My wife and kids flew, and I think I drove through campus like 1 a.m. And I think I told you this off air, but when we met the other day, but I just thought it was a cool connection. Like the city connects to the campus really well, but you could tell the resource gap there wouldn't make it incredibly easy. And I know he's going to do great things at Marshall too. I'm excited to see that. Now let's move on to Stan Wilcox. So Stan, someone you worked with at Duke as well, and so went on to be a really good athletic director. What'd you learn from Stan?
Yeah, calm and strategic leadership. Stan, I learned the importance of creating and executing strategy with him in my time at Duke. Stan has a lawyer. He was a lawyer and has a legal background, and so you could see how that would show up in everything what he do. But Stan has a calmness to him that it doesn't matter how high pressure the situation was or how quick the decision needed to be made. Stan was going to always be even keel, real calm, and approach a situation methodically and strategically. And so I've always respected him as a great strategic and calm leader.
Next up is the man himself, Dr. Kevin White, which I've promoted his book probably 100 times on here, and had him on the podcast to share. And I read that book in a day. I think maybe 2 days. Had him on. We talked on air for about 90 minutes, and got to see him talk about the book in Indianapolis at an event before that. And just a great leader. People have had such great things to say about him. But what did you specifically learn from Dr. Kevin White?
Yeah, I learned a lot from Kevin, being that I got to him right out of college, and so I was probably there the longest I've been anywhere in my career. But Kevin, one of the main things I learned from him is understanding how to navigate the political landscape of where you're at. He's one of the absolute best at it, right? Politics on campus, in the community, at the state, national level. Kevin exposed me, to so much at an early age and an early stage at Duke. He was not afraid to answer any question that I had there, and so I really respected that out of him. But Kevin is an incredibly savvy leader as well, and so but being sharp and being and savvy and understanding the political dynamics at the institutional level and also national level is one of the key takeaways that I've learned from him and working at Duke with him.
Yeah, and I think his AD tree was high 30s, and it'll probably be in the 40s before certain people eventually become ADs that naturally got their career started with him. Similar to you. And I think he even pointed out on the pod and in the book about his time at Notre Dame is basically where he thinks he did institutional politics wrong. And then that is like it was like a learning moment. And if anyone hasn't gotten the book, he shares a lot of great advice. You gotta. There's a reason why it was, picked highly in the D1 Ticker AD book recommendations. Although I thought it was funny that Brian did not mention his dad's book, but Danny did, and so that was kind of funny. So that leads us to Dr. Danny White. We talked about him at the beginning and the culture that he set at Tennessee. But what about him as a leader? You've worked with him more than one place. What did you learn just from Dr. Danny White now and really since you've been back at Tennessee?
Yeah, Danny and Kevin are in a lot of ways very similar, but they're different. Danny White, I got a lot of my business side of skills learning, so revenue generation for sure. Danny is the absolute best in developing and creating new ways to generate revenue. I think everybody's kind of understanding that, but being in it, living in it at both UCF and being here, I mean, he's a beast. Taking the traditional ways and taking it to even higher levels, and then also finding and unearthing new opportunities to generate revenue. His mind's constantly going, which keeps us all on our toes. But Danny's constantly pushing us to be the best versions of ourselves. But from a business mind, I don't know if there's another athletic director in the business that's better than Danny from that standpoint.
Yeah, I remember the SBJ article came out on and him talking, with Ross Ellinger about CBA, and he's really, I think, if anyone's going to get it to be taken seriously as an option, it's going to be obviously if Danny speaks it brings a lot of weight. So I'm sure he's having him on the podcast, a few months ago was exciting, and hearing even more about that athletic department. So that's always interesting to get the insights from people that have been with them, way back in the UCF days too.
Another week of higher ed athletics and another partnership announcement with AD Vantage. People are finally figuring out why I partnered with them, why Tanner Stump and his team have created the Moneyball of college athletic departments. Clemson, Louisville, Charlotte, Boise State, Coastal Carolina, North Texas, Missouri State, and Indiana State have all made the decision to partner with AD Vantage. So when you zoom out across the industry, there's definitely no shortage of data, but there is a lack of context with that data. You can see what programs are spending, but not always what they're getting in return. So AD Vantage, they start to connect those dots for you. It's not another expense line. It's a smarter way to deploy the ones you already have. I read you the list of partners. There's probably going to be another one soon. Why not you? Your competitors probably have already talked to them. College athletics is a decision sport. Make the right one and contact AD Vantage. Tell them Travis from Higher Ed Athletics sent you.
And then we want to end with a legendary football coach. It also happens to be your father. So, Coach David Cutliffe. Talk about having a knowledge of football and college athletics in general, who's been doing it for such a long time and getting to grow up with that. What do you just still learn maybe from your dad about the industry?
Yeah, so many lessons learned from him. Obviously, him having an important part in my foundational years. But resilience is the one thing that immediately comes to mind. As a football coach and being a coach, you got to be resilient given how the game's played, right? Broken plays, losses. You got to learn how to, what he says, treat the ground like a hot stove, get back up and pivot and move forward. So that is incredibly important for us to know as leaders, because given today with how the landscape is currently, right, you got to be willing to turn on a dime and be willing to bounce back from being dealt a blow. And so that's one of the things that's always at the top of my mind, is just how would he approach a situation, and if we get hit or we get punched, how do we get back up and how do we quickly pivot to move to continue to make progress?
As a youth football coach with my sons, I might have to steal that line, and when I'm trying to get them to get off the ground, treat the ground like a hot stove.
Treat the ground like a hot stove. Yes, sir.
That beats the floor is lava reference, because then they just all want to be on the ground and think it's funny. So no, that's just great to just learn from the people that have shaped you throughout your career. And I want to talk about your decisions to take certain jobs, to pursue certain opportunities, avoid certain places as you consider the different jobs. Just talk to me a little bit about career design, which I know is something very heavy on anyone I've talked to that is tied to Dr. Kevin White, including Andrew Goodrich at Akron, that this is a very important element that he would always preach, is designing your career in certain ways. So just talk about your decision-making process.
Yeah, well, something that my dad honestly has instilled in myself and in my siblings at an early age is he's always talks about the importance of being where your feet are, and you don't choose places, you choose people. I've tended to always make those type of career decisions based on the people that are in leadership and my alignment with them. My core values, they have to be in lockstep with the person that I'm working for, and that's something that I'm not willing to compromise. At each school that I've been at, Duke, UCF, Austin Peay, and even here at Tennessee, I've been blessed and fortunate to work with some great people, but also at the same time, I've been incredibly selective about the opportunities that I have accepted, and I'll continue to do so. But for me, Travis, it'll always be about the people first and then the place.
Yeah, it shows based on the people that we talked about, just a minute ago, that you've worked with, and then the people that you work with inside those athletic departments. because I know that there were some other incredible people, some that have gone on to become athletic directors themselves that you probably were working with alongside as teammates. I also try to always get a question that's more tactical strategy. I talked about my notebook. Some people, use it on their apps. What do you do to keep, like, when you pull something out of that you see in the ticker, or you see, a colleague talking to you about, or how they approach a press conference? What are you doing to track those things so that you can eventually, build in your own ecosystem whenever you have the opportunity to lead your own athletic department? And what I'll say is that's a big reason why I put out these AD film studies that I did the other, just a few weeks ago about press conferences of 4 recent AD hires, because I want to try and help people pull those in. So what do you do with that approach? I know everybody has like a binder or notes or something.
I do have a Google Drive that I kind of update periodically, and when I say periodically, at least once a week, where I have it, and I've done this because I've been at other places. What started out as a Microsoft Word document, and again, I did it because I actually, technically, let me back up. It started out as like just a black notebook that I would take up notes, and I would just sit in meetings with Kevin, and I would just write stuff down all the time, and stuff that I wanted to always remember. Hey, whenever I get my shot, my opportunity, I don't want to forget this. And then as technology has advanced and it's morphed, I've obviously moved from the black notebook to a Word document, and now it's a Google Doc so that it's in the cloud and I never lose it. But I do. I've been fortunate to work with some of the best leaders in the business, and so they've all have been really good in it at different areas. And so I'll try to take some of the best things that I learned from Stan Wilcox, some of the best things that I've learned from Gerald and Danny and Kevin, and even some of the other friends in the business that I think that are doing it at a really good level. I take some of those and I add to it. And so I want to make sure that I'm doing that, but also putting my own spin on it at the same time, right? And so I'll make some suggested changes for myself. If those are philosophical things, if those are actual tactical things, right, going on, and how are we generating revenue at this place, at a place that's maybe at a bigger school, at a smaller school. So I kind of take that in consideration. So I do have that, but I'm of the mind that if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. And so that kind of working document is always what I go back to. But I think you have to be prepared. If you're not, you're missing the mark, and you're going to be way behind.
Yeah, and I think D1 Ticker does a great job of putting out content that ADs are talking about, and then you go to things like CALs, which I've heard people talk about how you can, those more intimate settings where you learn from athletic directors. People hopefully pull some things from the questions I ask athletic directors and deputy athletic directors. But I'm just I like that D1 Tickers kind of went this strategy where later in the week they'll start putting out maybe more podcasts, because there are more podcasts. This is the one that I hope most people listen to, but there's also really good ones. Like Cal's has a podcast that they just recently had a really good Ryan Alper interview that I really enjoyed. And then there's just no shortage. I mean, John Wall Street's even interviewing like Ross Bjork and other athletic directors now as they dip their toe into college athletics. So the only challenge with that, right, is you got to have time to listen to it or watch it. And then you can't just quickly clip that and put it into your Google Drive. I need to get better probably about putting transcripts out, so that if you all see something you like, let me just link that transcript. And that's something I've been thinking about doing, that I have the option. But that's probably the only thing, right, is like when you're consuming this, I'm more of the mindset, if I'm going to consume a business podcast or something like that, if I listen or I read a book, like I'm reading presidential biographies right now, and you pull these leadership lessons, you hope that it all mixes into your head, and you then take some things. But when you can be more intentional about putting in a black notebook or on a Google Drive, that's going to be, the fact that you update it weekly is good too. But I mean, are you a podcast and book reader type of learner too, or is that more your outlet, those things just to not learn and maybe just more entertainment?
No, I'm a lifelong learner. I obviously working on my PhD now, and so when I'm not working on schoolwork there, I try to make time on my drive, either in or home. If I'm not talking to someone like a friend in the business or my dad or someone like that, I'll pop in a podcast and I'll try to listen to it, so that along the way I'm paying attention to it and I'm learning. And to your point, at certain periods you'll hear something that it actually makes sense. Let me pause that and actually let me put that in my notes for either just a quote or just something to think about. So I'm definitely more of the podcast guy, because that's also something that I can do while I'm working out. Unfortunately, I don't listen to like a lot of music like all the time. So I want something different other than music when I'm working out. And so sometimes I'll listen to a podcast while I'm getting it in as well.
Yeah, I'm actually reading this book. It's just called Heaven. I think it's Randy Alcorn. Now I can't remember if I'm saying that name right. But what's funny is my friend of mine from Bible study gave it to me as a gift because he liked it so much. And but he got it from a books from a library sale, and so he gives it to me. He's like, "Hey, I bought you this book," and I'm thinking, "Oh, you shouldn't have." And he's like, "Well, it's 50 cents." And I was like, "Okay, that's all right. Thank you then." And so I open it. 90% of the pages already have all these notes from the person that had it. And I was like, usually that's not great, but I feel like this person's probably like got even better notes than I could ever take of this book. and if there's a book that I want to learn more about, I think it should be about heaven. And so that's just a side note when you talk about like just trying to learn and consume things
Yeah.
that is important to me.
If you're watching this, you've seen the shirts, Higher Ed Athletics and Game One. Game One is the newest sponsor of Higher Ed Athletics. Tim McMurray recently came on and talked to you about uniform patches and contract details about apparel contracts, something that I know my audience can learn from. And with Game One, you can get Adidas, Under Armour, or Nike. With Tim McMurray, it just makes sense. A former athletic director, I've had countless conversations with him and really just trying to order some shirts. And I just think Tim brings everything that you would want in this type of business, someone that gets your job. He understands what you're dealing with. He understands really every detail about this process that you need to be on. I've just really enjoyed the conversations, and I know Game One can outfit your athletic department. Give them consideration. Game One and Tim McMurray.
You talked about your PhD, and I started this podcast. I probably said it 100 times, but the reason I started it was the first episode was like 2 months after I got into the doctorate program at IU. Now it's taken me forever to finish this thing. I'm now in the dissertation. I'm writing it right now on the future of the FBS athletic director job from the perspective of college presidents. I also had talked about I worked for the IU president for a year as well, and that shapes kind of my perspective. So I'm always curious. Like Andrew Goodrich has a PhD in higher education. Danny has one in higher education. Part of that, Kevin Whitetree, a lot of them did education doctorates. Was that part of it? But I'm also just kind of curious. What are you also looking to study at the dissertation phase once you're there?
Yeah, I could sit here and tell you that Kevin and Danny and other folks didn't have an influence on it. They kind of actually gave me the last little push or nudge that I needed to. But I've always been a lifelong learner. With my dad being a college football coach and my mom being a first grade teacher, education has always been there. And I've always known that I've had an interest at some type of terminal degree. And so that was one aspect of it. And as far as, studying from a research or dissertation standpoint, I plan to investigate the barriers that black men face in getting to the AD position at Power 4 institutions, with my own goals and dreams of getting into that position, and obviously the low number of black men that are in those positions at current state. I want to be able to investigate and do some research, and hopefully the person or people coming behind me can take a look at it, and it'll be some meaningful research, and hopefully we can change that narrative.
I was curious with that program, and I honestly think it will shape heavily, once you're in the AD chair also. But I know from studying higher education, I went on this, like, when I got into it, you probably feel this same too, maybe not as much, but at IU, it was higher education and student affairs. I was the only person that had any interest or experience in college athletics because I had a 10 plus year career in college athletics before I shifted full time to this. But that made it kind of good though. Like you got into this cohort of people that have no idea about college athletics. And so what I did is I basically turned my LinkedIn and Twitter at the time and my YouTube algorithm, everything had to be about higher education for like 6 months. I found out who the best authors were, the best, their best podcast, higher education. And so there's one name that stood out whenever it rang in my head when I saw that you're pursuing your higher education at Tennessee was Robert Kelchin is the department head at that program, and a younger faculty member, but he's someone that I had to read his finance book in a class. So I saw that whenever he went to Tennessee, and he's still there at Knoxville as a department head, but I learned so much from him and getting to see that he's at Tennessee too. And so I wondered if you've had a class with him yet, and with Dr. Kelchin.
Oh yeah, you're not getting out of the higher education administration program without having a class with Dr. Kelchin. I actually remember it was one of my spring semester classes, and the class, given that it was a doctoral class, there were 5 students, and so you weren't missing a question, a discussion question. You weren't missing presenting your homework assignment or anything out of there. But Dr. Kelchin and I had a lot of before class and after class discussions because he was fascinated, obviously, with everything in higher education, but he keeps his eyes on what's going on in athletics as well. And so we talk about, state appropriations and the levels, and hey, did you see how this state's starting to handle it? What do you think about that? And then he had become intrigued with NIL and how the landscape was evolving, and he was wondering how we were going to handle it and everything. So those conversations and discussions that I had with him were really, really thought provoking. And he's a great administrator and a great professor. He truly cares about the students and obviously making the place better in his position. I didn't know that he was like a big celebrity in higher education as well. And so as I started talking to other people about me being in his fiscal management class and everything like that, or a fiscal management in higher education class, people are like, oh, your professor, Dr. Kelchin, man, he's a legend in this. I'm thinking, whoa, it was pretty cool to hear from other people on that position.
Yeah, I think I remember when I first saw him, I had no idea too. I read his book, and it's a really good book about finances, and that's his niche, obviously, that it got him kind of scholarly published and kind of his main area of his career, I believe, still. But yeah, he knows his stuff about college athletics, though. That really what drew me to it, and so I think that's awesome. And then about just to dig in a little bit more, because a lot of the programs are the same as far as the content, but I got an institutional research certificate out of mine. I mean, you learn about I would just try to gear my projects towards what I thought the future of college athletics was going to be. But I mean, your actual classes, you can learn so much. And one thing I've mentioned several times, and it's part of what I'm asking presidents in my dissertation, is about deputies, we talked about political IQ of an institutional politics that Kevin had talked to you about. But sometimes it's hard for deputies to understand really the basic things of university faculty shared governance, or the cabinet, or the board of trustees, or the faculty affairs committees. And you learn all this stuff in a higher education program that, quite frankly, you're just not going to learn in a sport management doctorate or something. That's a big reason why I decided to go the higher education route. And I'm sure that played away. I mean, because you could have done something different too. But all those things, no matter what type of institution you're going to be at leading, I mean, you're gonna. That's the one thing. There's a lot of commonality with the structure, right, across higher education. Would you agree?
I agree with that. Again, it's one of the reasons too why I decided to pursue it. I always have a dream, like I said, about being an athletic director, and I think showing up on a president's or a chancellor's cabinet, you're going to be sitting around a table or across the room from one another with another colleague that has a PhD. And so, for me, if I can learn a lot about what goes on in his or her space, then that'll help. You spoke to the commonality piece. I could be a better colleague in that standpoint because, again, someone that's a vice chancellor, vice president of student affairs, they may not know the intricacies that goes on in college athletics. I can speak to that, but also I know we're both at the same institution and we're both, fighting for the same causes. I need to be able to have some type of at least baseline understanding of what problems he or she's dealing with, right? Or the provost being able to have a good rapport with he or she. And so that's only going to make you better. To your point, the classes in the doctoral program, they've pushed me beyond limits, but I've learned so much about what my colleagues across campus are going through. And so when I'm showing up in those settings, I can actually have a good frame of reference about what's going on, and also be able to provide some real input because I've been in some discussions in classes where we've talked about that, where we've talked about going to Nashville or going to the state capitol to be able to lobby on behalf to get more money for students, right? And so again, our athletes are subsets, but they're still students, right? And so we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help their experience. But globally speaking, how do we make the entire experience for all students across campus better? That just makes you more better of an individual to be able to speak on that by having that in your tool belt.
Yeah, and I just want to stress this to people. It's not to demean any other degree. Any advanced degree is important. This one is just structurally helps you understand the industry that you are truly going to operate within. And that's why it's called higher ed athletics. It's because the idea was, look, athletic directors are going to college athletics, even if as it continues to professionalize, will always operate within the greater ecosystem of higher education, American higher education. And it just gives you the credibility with the search committee it's going to maybe get you in the first round of interviews is that, well, we're deciding between these people. This one also has a PhD in higher education or an EDD in higher education. I mean, it's nothing to demean like law degree. All those are important too. This is just the subject matter expertise of it that comes with it. So I thought it was interesting that you're doing that. I'm happy that the more I research athletic directors, I'm going to have a piece out about this at some point, is a lot of them have doctorates. Like it's a growing number of people that have doctorates. I need to kind of get to see what deputies are pursuing that as well. So I'll stop harping on the higher education doctorate piece, but I do think it's just incredibly important for perspective. And then speaking about context, another thing with your career that you have is these different types of institutions you've been at. So, I mean, let's look at this. You've been at Duke, a small private, obviously a Power 4 school still, Austin P State, an FCS school, UCF, when you were there, it was the emergent FBS program that's now in the Big 12. And then Tennessee, obviously a blue blood, an SEC historic public institution, R1 institution. So how does this shape your outlook on the industry whenever you think about, I asked earlier about pursuing opportunities. I mean, the only people that come on this show as a deputy are people that obviously I think are going to be athletic directors soon, or at least in that position soon. You can kind of take this any direction, but like when these openings come up, and there's usually between 15 to 18 openings at a time, you can really understand what that job might be like just by working at these different types of institutions, right? So maybe speak to that a little bit.
Yep, I agree. And not to brag or boast or anything, but having experience and a background of working at private schools such as Duke, a smaller state school at Austin P, larger state school at Tennessee, and then you spoke to it, an emergent FBS at UCF. I've learned a lot, and in different experiences. Being that at Duke it was more about the board of directors or board of trustees, where here at the state of Tennessee or University of Tennessee, it is about the board of trustees, the board of directors, but also their state politics and bureaucracy that you have to deal with. But at any step and at any opportunity, I wanted to make sure that I learned what it was like to navigate in all of those settings. And so, as you talk about other jobs and other opportunities and everything, all of the schools are they're different, but yet they're similar. And when I say that, I speak from the realm of college athletics being able to and being about providing educational opportunities for athletes, right? And so as long as we keep that the main thing, then regardless of the level, if you're at FCS, if you're a group of 5, or if you're a Power 4, then we're all going to be talking about the same level. At the end of the day, regardless of what level you're at, we have an obligation to develop future leaders, and it's going to look different, but as long as we keep the main thing, we'll continue to have success.
Yeah, and I think that also helps really elevating even a current athletic director. I mean, we look at Brian Blair for just recency. He was obviously a great athletic director at Toledo, but he also was able to use that at a different type of school than a Syracuse. And then he ends up at Syracuse. And the other places, if you looked at where he had been as a student at Wofford, you see he's at Washington State, which was a P5 school, but it was still smaller P5 when he was there, and kind of like that newer age of P5. But then he had also been, at FAU and other places as well. And so I think having that not only helps that first opportunity, but it also then helps, I think, launch an understanding for your future jobs as well. So I think it's an awesome that how well-rounded, not only get to work with great leaders, but really the types of institutions, you've kind of gotten to get a taste of that, of every type of thing you could think of. And I want to kind of end it with asking you about, so I don't do like deep dive researches on people before they come on necessarily, because I usually know at least a little bit about your background. You and I had the chance to get coffee together anyways, and in Indianapolis, the Final Four weekend. But I saw in the Knox News, you were asked in this 40 under 40 thing about the most overrated piece of business advice you had ever heard. And I'm going to read a quote. It says, "The most overrated piece of business advice I've heard is the customer is always right. In some cases, the customer is wrong, but we have an obligation to educate them when it will benefit both parties," end quote. And so explain that in college athletics terms, because as someone who worked in hotel industry during college, it was always like, they're right. But like, I think it's interesting and good to hear you say that. So maybe just walk me through that. I know it might've been a while since you said that, but it made me laugh.
Yeah, you certainly did your research, because I had completely forgotten about that, to be honest with you. But
Well, has your mind changed?
No,
Okay,
not
good.
at all. It's still the same. So when I think about that, Travis, we got so many different stakeholders in college athletics. When you think about donors, fans, corporate sponsors, season ticket holders, and et cetera, right? And so we got to continuously educate them on how we arrive at decisions. Right, with social media and everything on the internet nowadays, there's so much misinformation out there, and there's incorrect information that causes confusion. So, for example, the donor may think we're increasing prices of their tickets or in their contribution levels just because we're interested in doing a money grab, and that's so far from the truth, right? But once that information gets out there, it's harder for us to kind of course correct and actually put the truth out there. But every dollar that we have, we put it directly back into the student athlete experience. I know we're at Tennessee, we do that, and I know there are other institutions that do the same thing. But if we don't educate them on the how or the why we're doing that, they'll carry that that negative narrative, and it'll spread and cause a whole bunch of confusion, right? And so when I say that, it's not to slight the customer or to slight that stakeholder, but it's honestly to, hey, let's have a conversation, let's have a dialogue. Well, actually, that's not the correct information, but here, let me help you. Let me educate you on what the right answer is. And again, it's not doing it in a disrespectful way at all. But again, that answer, we owe it to them and we owe it to ourselves to make sure that the most accurate information is out there while we're educating them along the way.
Yeah, and I saw one of those examples also can be as simple as I saw Oregon State Athletics on X a while back put out just a graphic that said the difference between house settlement and NIL. Because
Yeah.
I talked to my father-in-law, and he being a fan of college sports, he doesn't understand. He calls it nil too, which drives me crazy because I'm like, it's NIL, John. Like, come on. And he'll still call it nil, but he's a Purdue fan, so I have to bust his chops every once in a while as an IU person. But even that's an example of having to explain terminology because it can be confusing if you're not in this every day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it can be confusing. So then obviously Danny will go on and on X and correct things from time to time. He's one of the only ADs that really does that. But yeah, I think it's just I agree with the advice that not everybody is right all the time. And thanks. That's a really good example about price changes. I know Tennessee had dealt with that, or the talent fee type of thing that I believe was you all were involved in that as one of the schools that have done that. But like, everybody's going to have their opinion. And so, kudos to you all for understanding you got to try to course correct once it's out there. Because then, I think Malcolm Gladwell had a book about how those things just the tipping point, right? That book, if anyone's read it, I think about college athletics all the time when I hear anyone talk about tipping point in that book. So another book recommendation. So Marcus Hilliard, Tennessee Executive Associate AD and Chief of Staff. Marcus, thanks for joining me on Higher Ed Athletics. I really enjoyed the discussion.
Travis, thanks for having me.
I cannot believe it, but the Higher Ed Athletics road trip is about to begin in less than a week. I will be leaving from Indianapolis, going all the way down to Texas and back. Multiple stops, multiple interviews, multiple conversations off air, lots of lunches with deputies and athletic directors, and yes, I'm going to do some tourism as well. And I'm just looking forward to bringing you some great content. Make sure you're following the show on LinkedIn and YouTube. I'll be posting stuff there every day. But I have to shout out my two sponsors that are supporting this trip. Gas prices right now in Indianapolis is $5. It is absolutely crazy. But being able to do this trip, be able to cover my costs, I would not be able to make this trip possible and bring you all the content and the information without AD Vantage and PILYTIX.ai. They are the two sponsors that have been with me from the very beginning after I got laid off. They believed in the conversations I was having. I believe in the products that they put out, and I cannot thank them enough for believing in Higher Ed Athletics and really going above and beyond the original sponsorship deal to help fund this HEA road trip. I will continuously be talking about them because they are two incredible companies that you all need to learn from. And just want to thank their CEOs and founders, AD Vantage, Tanner Stump, and PILYTIX.ai, Jim Dries. It's just, I cannot thank them enough. So thank you for sponsoring this. And please follow HEA on LinkedIn as well as on YouTube so that you can see all the content. While I'm on the road trip, I'm going to be pretty much going through all the 20 plus athletic director openings every leg of the trip. I'm just going to give my opinion on what I think they might do. Any news, I'll be updating any breaking news in time about the athletic director position. That's all we do here is we study and talk about the athletic director position for current and aspiring ADs. Thank you all so much for watching and listening to Higher Ed Athletics.